Welcome to another episode of the Not podcast. It's not a podcast, but it's not a podcast either. I'm your host, Daryl O, and I'm here to share the stories and lessons my younger self desperately needed and to leave an archive for my future self to look back on and say, damn, bitch, you really did that. Each week, I like to take a topic, argue both sides, and find a middle ground to live in the paradox, because all truths are but half-truths, right? So this week, we are taking a deep dive into what it means to be not employable. And as somebody who has not been employed at a 9-to-5 since 2014 at a job that lasted for a total of 2 months, maybe less. If you listened to the episode last week or subscribed to my newsletter, you'll remember the story I told where my boss was bragging how she was at work on the weekends on overtime to see this startup come to fruition. A freaking e-commerce startup, by the way. It wasn't like transforming the landscape of the world, right? All while her grandmother, who raised her in the USSR, was like literally on her deathbed back home. And she was like trying to use it as a way to get me to like stay at the job. And like, it was this moment where I was like, you really are barking up the wrong tree. I gave my 2 weeks notice. In fact, I don't even think I gave my 2 weeks. I just like left with my boyfriend on a vacation to Iceland and like never looked back with like 2 middle fingers up. And so for me, being unemployable like is something that you wouldn't normally brag about, but it's sort of been like this source of pride, right? Like, it's not like I don't like working. I'm like a textbook recovering workaholic. I just mean it in the sense that like being employable, quote unquote, felt like some sort of code word normies used to say that they're easily indoctrinated and just simply lack the personality required to exercise their free will. You know, #GIRLBOSS. So after quitting that first job I had at that corporate startup for basically just having ethics, right? I just started to like start my first business at 23 years old in 2014 at like the height of the girl boss era. In fact, I think that's when the founder of Nasty Gal wrote and published that book that year. But I had no business education and nobody could tell me shit. I needed not nobody, not know how, right? Like the freaking gatekeeper at the Wizard of Oz. And I was inclined to keep it that way, you know, because I needed you to know that I didn't need you. But the joke's on me, because there is literally nothing more needy than needing to prove you're not needy. Like, duh. You know, but 2 years in, 3 years in maybe, I had opened not one, but 2 brick and mortar photography studios in New York City, you know, all under the illusion that I had found some independence, when in actuality, I was just running off of like pure pick-me energy, and all while playing like the struggle Olympics to assimilate to the woke movement of the 2010s. And even though like I'm technically a woman of color, like, let's be honest, I had a silver spoon shoved right up my asshole. And the motivation behind me sharing all of these identity struggles that I was going through was motivated by the fact that I wanted to feel included, right? Another very pick-me energy thing. But, you know, my life seemed really successful on the outside. I had this great company. I had this great community. I had built a social enterprise that was providing, you know, upward economic mobility for the LGBTQIA and BIPOC communities, #virtue signaling. But it was just a miserable existence dressed up in fancy language of a social enterprise, you know? And, you know, don't get me wrong. There was a lot of good that came out of that business and that community. I found some lifelong friends that I am still speaking with, got to see the early start of some incredibly talented individuals that are now running some of the most amazing agencies and businesses and art careers in the US, maybe internationally. I know a lot of Some of the people that have graced my spaces are doing international campaigns, from like Vogue Italia to the cover of Vogue. Like, truly incredible to be a part of that. And I don't want to just throw all of those memories under the bus, and certainly not any of those relationships and people. But, you know, sometimes I even look fondly back on the Instagram account for Holy Rad Studio. Ironically, I am locked out of that account, but I like reminiscing on some of those really like unparalleled talents that are now in these positions of power that are creating some of the most amazing art and work that the industry has to offer. But, you know, the real reason I want to share this is because the truth of the matter is that I was addicted to being a victim, right? I really had built a business just using other people's problems to avoid my own, and claiming that I had, you know, no time to make the art that I said I was going to make when I decided to become a quote unquote real artist. Like, I didn't have a bountiful community willing to help me, you know, and I built up all this unreasonable resentment eventually for the community and for the people that I worked with and who worked for me. Not because they did anything, right? Like, because I just refused to look myself in the mirror and say that, like, I was only cosplaying being independent, right? It kind of comes back to that whole, like, I'm going to prove that don't need anybody. Like, girl, wake up. But, you know, eventually, and, you know, surprise, surprise, like when Holy Rad went up in flames and I had like an absolute tower moment, you know, shout out to the tarot card. I would have learned to take some responsibility, like after I lost everything that I had worked so hard for, every single friend that I thought was going to be a lifelong partner and relationship and support system, every single, you know, piece of equipment that I had eventually stolen. I had like $30,000 worth of equipment stolen by this guy named Roosevelt Fontaine. I'm going to fucking use his real goddamn name, and he can come for me if he wants to, because I didn't sue him for all of that equipment, and I just hope that he's using it for good. But I digress. I would have learned, you know, I thought that you would think that the tower moment means like, oh, like repent, I know now. But like, I was too busy feeling bad for myself and being burned by like all of these quote unquote friends who had decided to like universally make me the scapegoat and villain. You know, if a Capricorn's the villain in your story, I guarantee your life got better because of it. So sorry, not sorry. But, you know, like, ultimately they were right to sort of feel that I was a villain. Like, I am a Capricorn sun and Libra rising. Like, the crash outs I have are a particular brand of just like absolute scorched earth Kali Ma, like Daenerys Targaryen, you know, that would seem really irrational to anyone who had not known me before my villain arc. But like, now it's not so hard for me to admit that I had become a very mean and unhappy person, you know, and I'm at a place now where it feels good to be able to know that. And, you know, to be fair, I grew up in a house that was built on a very specific kind of script. Comment below if this sounds familiar. Guess I'm just a bad mother then. And, you know, when you hear this or you live in this kind of dynamic, this play, and your role is the scapegoat, it trains us to stand outside of our own boundaries, like unable to reach our own needs. Because, you know, in that family system, there are boundaries, right? They seem healthy because the boundaries are this white picket fence that you can see from the street, and we're all performing the roles that we're supposed to and being socially acceptable. But the fence that I grew up in was not a fence of safety. It was like a cage itself. And it really was an insidious problem to have and to reconcile in my life, because when it looks okay and you're doing the right things and you're coming from a place where you're just trying to keep the peace and keep mom happy, and you're trained to think that when you set up a boundary in your life, right? Like when I set up a boundary in my life where I said, I don't like when you don't listen to me. I don't like when you read my diary. I don't like when, this X, Y, and Z. And it can only be taken as a personal insult. You just slowly but surely become trained to be a people pleaser, to be trained to make your boundaries like so close to your own face that by the time people cross them, the only option you have is to like have an absolute crash out, and when you're inside that white picket fence, or in my case, on the outside of that white picket fence, where you see the boundary exist, but you don't realize the relativity of where you are to it, it's hard to learn the obvious, right? Like, how are you supposed to see this shit from the back of your head, especially when everybody else around you is like praising your family for being so beautiful and so successful and having good kids with good grades that went to good colleges, But ultimately it taught me that when something feels bad, you can't leave. And so I had to learn the very basic skill of recognizing more early on in the experience that I no longer wanted to be in a friendship, be in a business, be in a relationship, before you stay so long that the people leave you, or in my case, create a absolute emotional breakdown intervention where they like flew my parents in and my brother in and sat me down and said like, girl, you need to get some help. But that kind of takes me to the next chapter in this conversation, which is like taking radical responsibility, right? Radical responsibility is when you recognize that even if it's not your fault, it is your responsibility. And when you claim that responsibility, you have power. So for example, and trigger warning here, when I was in a relationship with a man who was abusing me physically, I had so much shame and embarrassment that it was my fault, that I was somehow this dumb girl that ended up in the arms of somebody who had the audacity to put his hands on me. But I was so ashamed of that and so scared of that potential fact that it was my fault, that I didn't claim responsibility that I had gotten myself there. And when you don't claim responsibility for getting yourself into a situation, you don't have the power to get yourself out. So radical responsibility looked like me recognizing I didn't want the life I had anymore. And instead of learning how to set boundaries and break up with my boyfriend of 8 years and break up with my best friend of 10 years and break up with this business that was crumbling around me and during COVID was barely keeping its head above water. I mean, we were bleeding left and right. I clung onto it for dear life and to an identity that like no longer served me. See, when you're working for yourself, it only actually works. It's only a source of pride to be unemployable if you're actually working for yourself. I was working for everybody else to be needed enough to prove that I didn't need to be needed. And like, that's a circle jerk that's not going to go anywhere. So if you're hearing this and you're freelancing and you're saying yes to clients you don't want and money that barely covers the expenses of the mental health support required, right, to even survive those clients, then you're running into an emotional debt that will catch up to you. Because let's be honest, like nobody hates the consistent paycheck and benefits that come from a corporate 9-to-5. Like, it's just that if you're working a 40-hour work week under the banner of quote unquote being a strong, independent woman in a house where the kids resent you and your husband sleeps on the couch because he snores, even though your kids know the real reason is that you're killing time until they leave for college so that you can separate, and where your amphetamine habit masquerades as an ADHD medication just to survive the day, then that steady paycheck isn't freedom at all. You're not a strong, independent woman. You're in captivity, shrink wrapped and delivered in Amazon boxes. Okay? So we understand that being unemployable and having this girl boss energy running a business where you are your own boss is not that different from the woman working that 40-hour work week if you aren't actually recognizing the things that you want and the things that you need that work for you. Right? We've got to clock the root cause of these things. What's motivating us? Why are we doing what we're doing? Why did we get into the business that we got into? Because it's so easy in this world as we're trying to keep up with bills and try to keep our head above water in this economy and just trying to exist in 2025. It's so easy to slip into something that looks and feels like independence when it's not. Right? So that's why I have this concept of not, because it's not that I want to be unemployable and it's not that I'm simply employable. Okay, both of those examples are not necessarily what I want, but what does it mean to not be employable? That gray space of finding the edges of what you're willing to take and not take. And so it wasn't until I got a call from my absolute dream client where she asked me to stop the bleeding in her business after having to basically fire her entire team. I was like kind of surprised at how quickly I was willing to say yes, but I've been working as the operations manager for this amazing 6-figure business that I genuinely love, adore, and look up to and think is making a beautiful impact on the world. And she's giving me a consistent paycheck that pays me well. She gives me autonomy. She trusts my experience and hasn't forced me to sign some ridiculous non-compete clause in some contract that just like signs my life away, right? I realized something like so beautiful, which is I don't need to be needed. I want to be wanted. Right? Isn't that so different? Does that just like feel different in your bones when you hear that? So while yes, I can go to the depths of the rock bottom and get high as a kite riding the sweet, sweet addiction of workaholism, a consistent paycheck with like regular hours has like created more freedom for me in the last 2 weeks than I thought was possible. Just like the weight lifted and the ease of knowing that I have income coming in and it's not hinged upon whether or not the client's going to like the deliverables and whether or not that client's client is going to like those deliverables and whether or not they're going to pay me in the actual 90 days that they said that they were going to pay me, and I have to float my entire team on a credit card that just like blows my entire psyche to the wall. Like 10 years of that caught up to me. And it's probably why to this day, like I can't even pick up a camera for somebody else, and I'm working on that. But for now, I just think I am happy to have discovered that without all of that loss it took to get there, I certainly would not have been qualified for the job. But now that I've been through it and I found a job that really fits me, God, that feels good. You know? So if it's like kind of all crashing and burning around you, right? Like maybe you're having a tower moment that sounds similar to the one that I had back in 2020. You know, what do you think God coming in and answering your prayers is going to look like? Right? When I was living in New York, peak COVID, my partner at the time was an SGA Buddhist, and we would spend every morning doing the Nam-myoho Renge chant. And I would pray to God, please just like make this easier for me. Like show me what is best for my highest good. And the more and more I prayed, the harder and harder the life that I was trying to uphold felt. And instead of surrendering into the collapse or recognizing that my life wasn't serving me anymore and actually cutting everybody loose and saying, hey, you guys, like we've all moved on. I could have maybe saved some of those relationships. I definitely would have been able to, I think, still be on speaking terms with some of those people. But like, it's okay. It's okay. Like, I'm so happy now. And like, one thing that my boss says that I love is happiness is the way to happiness, right? Your new life is going to cost you your old one. And it might be hidden in plain fucking sight in the idea you refuse to consider an option. So I'm going to leave it there. But this week on Not My Favorite Things, where I discuss my favorite things for now, I am really, really obsessed with boys' underwear, like little boys' underwear. Okay, that sounds Daryl. Come on, like articulate yourself. What I mean to say is that I love wearing the like 3 to 4 pack of boys boxers you can get at like the Walmart section of like what I meant to say is that my favorite running shorts right now, I'm actually wearing them, are these Nike Pro boys running shorts. I think they're actually just boxer briefs. And because they don't have like the big like crotch area, Daryl, this sounds so wrong. Okay, because it doesn't have like the big pocket for your junk like the men's boxer briefs have, it actually fits really well on my body. And the real reason I like buying kids underwear and undershirts is because it's just freaking cheaper. Like a 3-pack of women's running shorts from Nike is gonna run you upwards of $75 even at like a TJ Maxx. Okay. So when I discovered that if you go to the boys section in Walmart or in Dollar Tree and they have all these really lovely nylon boxer briefs, I just went ham. I got a 5-pack for I think like $10, and they're just the same quality as the ones you get at like the actual Nike store in the adult section. So you're welcome. So next on my list of my favorite things is getting a hobby that is not for the internet. Okay, folks. For me right now, that is crocheting. I was about, 5 years old when I learned how to crochet, and it's something that I used to really love to do, but it wasn't until I started traveling again that I needed something that I could occupy my hands with, wasn't screen time, was a little meditative. And so for me, that is crochet. And if you follow me on Instagram, I'm actually going to post a reel of this really cute little like top and bottom set that I made from this pack of like 100% like pure white wool. Okay, Sydney, sweetie. I really recommend getting like a small needle, something that is easy to travel with. I put it in one of these amazing Ziploc bags. I wouldn't even call them Ziploc bags. They're like mesh zipper bags. And the great thing is that it's something that like you can gift other people. It's something that's easy to like, stay creative and like not have it be for sale. That's like so important for me in my creative process. And it's something that I took away from the Artist Way that was like really impactful. So follow me on Instagram for that cute little set if you want to see how I did it. And last but not least, I wanted to share these amazing incense matches. I got a couple of these from a gift shop in Joshua Tree for like $2 a pack, but I think you can get them on Amazon for cheaper. This one is sandalwood and it smells amazing and it looks exactly like a little matchbook, but when you light and strike it and leave it on the foil, it just burns like a little piece of incense. So this is great to put in your purse. I have traveled with it in my carry-on. They've never flagged me, but like, don't take my word for it. I'd put these in your check-in bag if I were you. But yeah, it's really nice if you like need to poop somewhere and you don't want to leave a stank behind. But it's also a really great way to just make yourself feel at home if you're constantly living on the road like I am. It's really difficult to find ways where you can like create. It's really important to find ways when you're living on the road to just create some consistency. And even though I have been in Canada visiting my partner's family for the last few weeks, I am going to be back stateside living out of my suitcase for the rest of the year. And I just really, really love having these with me because the scent along with the ritual really grounds me and allows me to like feel at home with myself, even though I don't actually have a home. Right. So that's it for this week, you guys. Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed the topic. Like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And I will see you guys here in 2 weeks for another episode of the Not podcast. Bye.